While predatory slimes are fascinating, would you care to have some fun together another time? Sure, but what will we play with? Solution flicked her eyes to the vampires behind them. Sholtia noticed her reaction and smiled in delight. They were not a bad idea, but I was thinking that if there was an invader, we could catch it and ask Lord Aints for permission. Very well, then please call me when the time comes. It would be fun to swallow one up to their chest and leave the rest hanging out. Nice. You must get along with the officer of torture, Mistress Neuronist, the special intelligence gathering officer. Unfortunately, I can keep up with her. Sholtia was about to open her mouth to speak again when a voice called out from behind them. Solution, everything is ready here. Let us leave soon, shall we? Sebas had changed the reins and was sitting in the driver's box. Of course, I am coming now. Mistress Sholtia, I regret to take leave, but if you excuse me. Sholtia looked up at Sebas, while Solution bustled into the carriage. Well, Sebas, we part ways here. I see, so you know where the bandit hideout is now. Yes, we were going to attack it and see if there is anyone with the type of information Lord Aints is seeking. This time was a disappointment, I see. It was a pleasure to work with you, Mistress Sholtia. Thank you for that. Let us meet again in Nazarick. Yes, now if you would excuse me, Chapter 2, A True Vampire. Two shadows were sprinting through the forest. Sholtia's minions and concubines, the vampire brides. Most people would have had trouble with their footing on this animal trail, cutting through the woods. Branches stuck out from either side. But even in the darkness, the vampire brides hurried down the course path at an unbelievable speed in their high heels. They didn't get their dresses caught at all. The one running in front was carefully carrying Sholtia with two hands. The one in back was dragging something that looked like a dried-up tree trunk. They weren't far from where they had left Sebas and Solution. They didn't have an odometer, so they weren't sure how much farther it was to their destination. But they figured they still had quite a ways to go. But suddenly a hard metallic sound rang out. The vampire in front stopped in her tracks. There was one narrow path. If the leader stopped, the one behind had no choice but to follow. Why did you stop all of a sudden? The vampire bride in front tried to answer the question from behind, but before she could, she shuddered from the cold glare being shot at her from the small form she held in her arms. An icy feeling crept up her spine. She knew her mistress had a personality that was neither gentle nor merciful. Sholtia was still being cradled like a girl swept off her feet as she crankily moved her legs. Keenly sensing the meaning behind the gesture, the vampire relaxed her arms. Sholtia hopped down like a bird flying out of a cage. She floated lightly through the air. First, her high heels touched down, then her dress slipped down afterward to cover her slender legs. Once on the ground, she pushed back her long silver hair in annoyance and turned her head slightly. The vampire swallowed hard in the cold glare of her mistress. What do you think you're doing? Sholtia didn't run through the forest herself for two reasons. It was simply a pain, and she didn't want to get her shoes dirty. There was actually one more reason, but no one present dared say or think it. Only a handful of people in all of Nazarick could say it to her face. As long as a vampire bride was acting as Sholtia's feet, it was unforgivable to stop without an order. Sholtia didn't need legs that moved of their own free will. The punishment depended on the reason. That was implied. One would think punishment would be enough, but Sholtia's question had contained a bit of murderous intent. In the great tomb of Nazarick, the power of life and death over anyone not directly created by the 41 supreme beings rested with the floor guardians who ruled over them, or their domain guardians. Upsetting Sholtia any further could end in death. With a sense of foreboding, she slowly opened her mouth to speak. Please forgive me, I am caught in a bear trap. Sholtia's eyes moved, and she saw that one of the vampire's slim legs was sandwiched in a roughly made metal trap. This wasn't made to use against humans, but more for tough wild animals like bears. If a human's ankle was caught in it, the bone would probably snap, even if they were wearing protective greaves just from the impact. But vampires were different from humans in every way imaginable. Although the teeth of the trap had dug into her leg, there were no signs that she was experiencing pain or that any bones were broken. In fact, it didn't seem like she was injured at all. Vampires had a power that reduced most effects of any physical attack, not done with weapons made of silver or a special metal equivalent, or weapons with a certain level of magical power. She may have been bitten by the bear trap, but because it was merely iron, it couldn't hurt her. If she got it off, the holes would heal up instantly. However, even if she was completely immune to the bear trap's damage, it was fulfilling its other aim of preventing her from moving perfectly well. It was clear from the fact that it wasn't poisoned that this trap wasn't meant to kill its captive. Its purpose was to slow down the target by giving it extra baggage. Sholtia shook her head, almost berating the vampire as hopeless. Hurry up and get out of it then. Yes, right away. Taking Sholtia's order, the vampire reached down with her skinny arms. She grabbed either side of the toothy jaw and pried it open without difficulty. The bear trap freed its prey, unable to cope with her bear's surpassing strength. A beautiful lady prying open a bear trap. It was the kind of scene that seemed almost laughable, but those who knew a vampire's strength wouldn't have been surprised. If there's this sort of trap around here, we must be getting closer to our destination. I thought we had quite a ways to go still. One moment, please. The vampire following behind them threw on the ground the dead branch-looking thing she'd been carrying. It was a human corpse that had lost all its moisture, completely mummified. But it wasn't just a corpse. As proof of that, it began to jerk and move with false life. Long claws began to grow from the ends of its withered hands, and in its vacant orbits, a red glow the same as the vampire's began to flicker. Oddly sharp canine teeth jutted out of its slightly open mouth. It was a monster called a lesser vampire. This was what the bandit from before had become, after they drank all his blood. I have a question. Are we getting close to your hideout? The lesser vampire nodded deeply and made a sound between a grunt and a scream. Apparently so, Mistress Sholtia. I see. I wonder why there aren't any linked traps. It would have made sense for there to be a noisemaker and a secondary trap, but there didn't seem to be anything like that. Sholtia scanned the area. Perhaps she was checking for concealed enemies. The vampire brides followed her lead and looked as well. Then Sholtia shook her head. Well, it's probably fine. I don't really have search skills anyway. Hearing that quiet comment, the vampires realized why she had been forgiven. None of them, including their mistress, had skills that could have discovered hidden devices. They hadn't been aware of the bear trap. That's what had saved her life, their mistress thinking it was perhaps unfair to punish someone for being unable to do something even she couldn't do. Perhaps we should have borrowed that girl. Solution had the assassin class. With her thief skills, detecting traps was probably easy. Well, it's no use asking for the impossible. Let us hurry onward to this den of thieves. Eventually, Sholtia's band reached the area near the mercenaries' hideout. Though still in the forest, they saw the trees grew gradually sparser. When the three of them continued toward their destination, the trees disappeared. They emerged into a meadow with a large number of rocks jutting out of the ground, a type of topography called karst. It was among the bowl-shaped hollows that a hole opened up in the ground. Some light was spilling out of the cave. The way it shone suggested the inside of the cave was a gentle slope leading deeper into the ground. Things installed on either side of the opening indicated a human presence, barricades about as tall as a man's torso. They weren't particularly tough-looking. They had just been thrown together with a few logs. There was a guard posted on either side, for a total of 2. They used the barricades as cover for their lower bodies. If arrows started to fly, they would no doubt duck and sound the alarm. In a normal battle, a charge from this distance would give their opponents time to ready their weapons and call for reinforcements from inside the cave. They could try to sneak up on them, but anything big enough to hide behind among the rocks had been cleared away. Furthermore, the guards had large bells slung from their shoulders. Even if they could take them out in a sneak attack, the bells would sound. This would alert those inside to an enemy attack. They had put quite a bit of thought into this, but there was one way to break through a seemingly impossible physical situation: magic. Sholtia could cast silence and kill them in one shot. She could approach using invisibility. She could lure them away using charm person. She could also break the bells. Which way is the most fun? Sholtia had gotten that far when she realized she was missing one vital piece of information. Is there just the one entrance? The lesser vampire answered her question with a jerky nod. Sholtia broke into a smile. Then there was no need to stand here thinking any longer. Sturdy guards were effective against sneak attackers. They were also effective against people who thought fighting outnumbered was a disadvantage. But Sholtia and her vampire brides were different. They could crush the worms known as humans with their overwhelming power. So there was not a single reason they couldn't march straight up to them and attack head-on. Her caution was motivated by the possibility that their prey might have a back exit to escape through. What? Well then, we've already come this far. There's no reason for us to stay hidden. I am just not very good at this stealth business, all the tiptoeing around. That's because Mistress Sholtia's presence alone makes everything around her shine more brilliantly. The obvious isn't flattery. If you want to flatter me, you're going to have to think a little harder. Ignoring the vampire bow, Sholtia reached out to grab the lesser vampire. You're going to lead the charge. Now go. With a swing of her slender arm, she sent the lesser vampire whistling through the air toward one of the guards. She put some spin on the former bandit, so he flipped end over end dozens of times on his way. The impact caused an unbelievable amount of damage. The guard lost his head and also half his chest. Blood sprayed into the air. The other guard couldn't comprehend what he'd just witnessed. He stared dumbstruck at the horrific corpse of his partner. The smell of fresh blood filled the area. From the perspective of the one who threw the corpse, it was an extremely entertaining scene. Strike. Splendid, Mistress Sholtia. Sholtia pumped a fist, and the vampire brides clapped. It goes without saying that although the lesser vampire had been blown to bits, none of these three cared one bit. He hadn't been a member of Nazarick. They just created him for a lark, so of course they didn't get emotional when he was destroyed, and there was no way Sholtia would remember promise with a human. Okay, one more. Sholtia looked between the vampires. Alarmed, the two of them quickly found a suitably sized rock to hand her. Here we go. Bells could be heard in the distance as she hefted the somewhat large rock. Her slender arm whipped down at tremendous speed. In the next instant, upon seeing the far-off results of her action, she happily announced her battle performance. Next is strike two. That is what you say, right? Another round of applause followed. They could hear a guard inside. He was shouting that they were under attack, alerted by the bells. As the commotion in the cave gradually spread, Sholtia smiled tenderly at its entrance and gave orders. Now then, let us go. You climb a tree and watch for anyone running away. And you go in ahead of me. If there are any tough guys, let me know so I can look forward to them. Yes, Mistress Sholtia, off you go. The vampire ordered to go ahead of her took a big step. She slowly proceeded toward the entrance to the cave and disappeared. The ground had caved in. No, it hadn't. It was a pitfall. Sholtia may have been able to evade it, but apparently the vampire wasn't fast enough to avoid losing her footing. Are you serious? This vampire was a low-level minion with no trap detection skills. There was nothing that could be done about that. That's why Sholtia had forgiven her before, but she couldn't help but let a disappointed comment slip out, even knowing all that. Then she pasted a grin on her face. It wasn't kind, full of goodwill or embarrassed. A pitfall in front of the entrance to cave should have been predictable. She felt foolish for not thinking of it and angry about being caught. Those emotions bubbled up and manifested as a smile. It was inexcusable that a minion of Sholtia, blood-fallen, guardian of multiple levels of the glorious great tomb of Nazarick, should have been caught in such a trap. Words brimming with murderous intent escaped her lips. I'll butcher you. Get out of there. The vampire leaped out and appeared on the edge of the pit. She was unharmed. Only her clothes had gotten dirty. Don't be so disappointing. My apology, whatever, just go. Or should I hurl you in, like that garbage from earlier? Sholtia made a clutching motion with one hand. The vampire acknowledged the order with a shriek and went trotting into the cave. Sholtia walked leisurely after her. There was some kind of commotion going on. Pausing from the weapon maintenance he'd been doing in his private room, he pricked his ears. A clamor arose. There was the thudding of multiple people running. He also heard a faint scream. They were definitely under attack, but it was impossible to tell how many enemies there were or how strong they were. Despite this, everyone was trained to shout that information. It wasn't that he couldn't hear. His room was private, but it was still inside the cave. Instead of a door, there was only a curtain hanging over the hole in the wall. The fabric was thick, but he could still hear the voices fine. The mercenary gang, Sowers of Death, had a little less than 70 members. Even if there was no one as strong as him, there were other battle-hardened veterans. A sneak attack by a small force wouldn't cause this much panic, though, so it could have meant there was a large number of enemies. But in that case, He couldn't explain why he was unable to hear them moving around or sense much of anything. Then adventurers, if there was a small number of enemies with high combat ability, this off feeling might have made sense. He stood up slowly and slung his weapon from his hip. His armor was a mail shirt. It took no time to put on. Then he hung a leather pouch filled with ceramic potion bottles on his belt and tied it fast. He was already wearing his necklace and ring, which contained defensive magic, so his preparations were complete. He whipped aside the curtain so fast, he practically ripped it off the wall. He entered what could be called the base's main corridor. Several stolen lanterns containing the spell Continual Light were hung at regular intervals along the wall. They made it so bright it was hard to believe this was inside a cave. Light illuminated his whole body. He had a slim build, but he wasn't too skinny. The flesh under his clothes was solid as steel. This was a product of not only weight training, but also actual battles. His hair had been cut haphazardly. It grew mop-like in every direction without lining up at the ends. His brown eyes gazed sharply forward. He had a smile close to a sneer about his mouth. His chin grew stubble like mold. All this combined to give him an undisciplined appearance, but when he walked, he practically glided. He had the grace of a wild predator. As he walked toward the entrance that was under attack, a man rushed at him. It was a face he knew, one of the mercenaries. When the man saw him, he broke into a smile as if they had already won. "What's going on? Brain, we ray under attack." Smiling wryly, Brain replied, "I got that. How many? Who are they?" "There are 2 enemies, both women. 2 women. The Blue Roses, Nak and TB." Cocking his head, he strode off toward where the clamor could still be heard. The strongest party of adventurers in the kingdom, the famous Blue Roses, was made up of 5 women. What's more, the one member Brain had a run-in with, which ended in a painful draw, was an old lady. He also heard rumors that the best assassin in the empire was a woman. Strong women weren't a rarity. Even if there was often a gap in the sex's physical ability, magic was easily able to close it. Brain was sure that piling the highest level magic on top of the strongest possible physical body would simply make someone invincible, but still, Brain's mental state was gradually taken over by his building excitement. He also felt respect for the opponents who pulled off a sneak attack with small numbers, and he felt a will to fight that came close to a hunger to face powerful enemies. "You don't have to come along. Hang back and fortify the rear or something," he said to the sellsword, and then set off resolutely toward his unknown adversaries. He was Brain Unglaus. In the beginning, he had been a simple peasant, but he had ability that could have come only from heaven. Specifically, ability with a sword, and he was born a talent holder to back up his sword skills, so with a weapon, he was invincible. He was a combat natural who never got more than a scratch on the battlefield. He had never been beaten with a sword and had planned to carry on his undefeated record. Everyone believed so, and he himself had no doubts. Then the royal tournament changed his life. He hadn't participated with a strong conviction to win. He just wanted the whole kingdom to know how strong he was. Then everyone would bow at his feet. But he met an unthinkable result: defeat. His first defeat since grasping a weapon, no, perhaps the first in his entire life. The one who defeated him was named Gazov Stronov. He was the current captain of the Royal Select, and known throughout neighboring countries as the strongest warrior in the region. Up until their bout, both had amassed a pile of nearly instant wins, but their clash was a long fight that ended up taking all the time they had previously saved. In the end, it was Gazov's martial art, the fourfold slash of light, that decided the match. The fight was still talked of, but the fact that the lowborn Gazov was now captain of the Royal Select really said it all. It was an impressive fight. Even the nobles who detested the captain couldn't say he was weak. The winner got the glory. For Brain, the loser, it was as if everything he had built up in life had been destroyed. Even though it had been a narrow defeat, he learned that he had only convinced himself there were no warriors stronger than him. He'd been living like a frog in a well. After spending a month in isolation, he broke through the despair that would drive many to the bottle and picked himself up. He turned down multiple invitations from nobles. For the first time in his life, he sought power. He sought technique and trained his body. He sought magic and increased his knowledge. The prodigy put in the effort of a successful hard worker. Defeat took Brain to another level. He decided not to work for the nobles because he didn't want his ability to decline. To pursue the skills he had learned, he needed opponents. He wasn't interested in swordplay for sport or show. He wanted a job with decent pay that would give him frequent opportunities to fight real battles. He didn't choose to become an adventurer and earn their exceptional rewards because adventurers didn't have much chance to cut down people. Monsters were bad opponents, but Brain's ultimate goal was to defeat Gazef, so he needed to fight humans. From the slim number of options left to him, Brain chose the Sowers of Death, although he would have joined any mercenary gang. He was after only one thing: rewriting his defeat with a victory. To acquire the weapon he wanted, the power he needed, he gave up everything. Magic weapons were expensive, but the one he wanted wasn't just any magic weapon. There was a city far to the south of the kingdom, in a desert. Weapons from there found their way up every now and again. They could cut better than most magic weapons, even when unenchanted.